everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, which is the very first of the new IMM Alumni training series. And we've left it a couple of minutes just because I know there's a couple more people looking to sign in. There's 10 of us all together on the webinar at the moment. I think, including the presenters, we've got 15 actually. So we're going to be, I think as people join, pretty close to our full complement. We did only promote this to quite a small group, to our scholarship members, also to the SIT alumni members. A bit confusing. We've got two alumni in the mix, and then my internal team as well. It's a new course. It's going to grow across the year. We've got new people joining with each of the training sessions coming up. But as the first joining, you're going to have a good opportunity here to set the topics and the direction of the course going forward as well. We do have, I sent out an agenda yesterday, and we have 2 hours down for the session. That's really just to give it enough room to breathe and for everybody to input if you want to input, and we encourage you to do so, that you've got a chance to do that. But I don't anticipate it going to 2 hours, but it just gives us that space that we can hear from you if you want to speak, if you want to talk about your experience with using photography and art and impact measurement, you can do. That's really what we wanted with this course, is to have that, again, have that space that in IMM Builder, which most of you have been through, or you're starting to go through, often we're trying to pack a lot of topics into a 90-minute session. And so it's quite a relief to have, well, I guess today 2 topics, because we're introducing the alumni courses as well, but actually to have the space generally on these courses to just cover one topic. And as we'll come to, you have a choice as a group as to what we cover in these courses going forward, which is something a bit different from what we normally do. So what I'd encourage you to do as well, if we will be going through various exercises throughout today, it's quite interactive, so we will get to at least hear from you in the chat box, if not coming in on audio, if you're happy to do that. But if you'd like to just introduce yourself in the chat box, please feel free to do so, including my team as well. That'd be great. And my team's taking part in the exercises as well, from In Focus. But that's quite a nice thing that developed last year on Builder, was that everybody was just entering in there who they were, where they're from. And I think you all know me. I've either met you in person or met you through the training. But just in case there's somebody who I've not met, I run the training courses at In Focus. Been running training for a long time now. I guess 2007, so 13 years or so. And yeah, it's exciting to be running a new course. So hopefully you can all see my screen now. This is recording, so if you need to drop off early, or you drop out through your internet connection and you miss any of this, you are more than welcome to watch back the recording and to catch up. And as we'll come to, there's an e-learning version of this webinar that's coming next month as well. But this would be a good cue for me to introduce how the course is going to work. So I'll just come back to start to kick us off. So just a bit of background to where the IMM Alumni course came from. So it really was developed, and it is being developed just in response to the question, what comes next after the IMM Builder course? So we've got I'm not sure how many people have completed Builder now, but it grows all the time. And then we kept getting the question, but what happens next? And can we continue in some way? And so that's the idea of the IMM Alumni course. Firstly, it's to dig deeper into different topics and to give a bit more room to do that. We talk about art and photography in IMM Builder, but we can only talk about it in a 10-minute segment. This gives us that room to go a lot deeper. It's about providing ongoing professional development in IMM, and always being focused on giving you tips and resources to improve your practices in impact measurement and management. And we've got a really good group on the call today. Those that are coming in future courses as well are, experienced practitioners in this area of work, or even if they're just starting out, they've got a lot of interest in this topic. So it's an opportunity also to exchange ideas. As the group grows across the year, that will become more and more prominent. That's really the point here too. It's that platform for exchange. There's plenty of room today to hear what you've done in the area of art photography, or if you've not worked in that area, thinking about what you might do in future. And it gives you a bit of choice and direction over what we cover. So we're going to come to this in a little bit, and even start today to think about some topics that we could cover in future on the course, and start to get your feedback into that. But it is quite a democratic course in terms of what we cover, and what we decide to cover as a group. And so how does it work? So any of you, well, all of you who are on this call have access to alumni training, whether you're internal to InFocus, whether you're a scholar, or whether you've come through the SIT alumni group. And each module is led by an IMM expert. First couple is likely to be me, but I'm very keen to bring in, depending on what topics you want to do, I'm really hoping they're topics I like, but it will be also looking to bring in experts in different areas as well, both into the webinar and into the e-learning. And here's what a typical year will look like around IMM alumni. So we've got here, I'll get my pen out. We've got a webinar here that we're doing today on art and photography as we get into our main topic. And then that will be followed by an e-learning version of the webinar that goes into more depth. So today we touch on some different techniques you can use. In the e-learning, we're going to describe step by step how you can develop those techniques, and you can do that at your own pace. And then we pick up with another webinar in April. And it's completely up to you. You might just join the webinars and not do the e-learning. You might do the e-learning and not join the webinars. They complement each other. The e-learning is to go into a bit more depth. But you'll see, again, we haven't set these topics. These are going to be, for us to kick off on today's call to start to choose those different topics. But that's broadly how it works. So it's not too intensive either. So in terms of your time, if you're joining across a year, it's a 2-hour, well, a 90-minute to 2-hour webinar. And then the e-learning would be about 2 to 3 hours, we're thinking at the moment, depending on the depth you go into. Some people shoot through the e-learning modules in under an hour, and other people take 3 hours. It's very hard to give a timing for the e-learning. So it's not a very heavy course. We might later in the year look to set up some forums as well, where we can exchange ideas. We're just going to see how it goes, but it's quite light in terms of timing. And again, you can choose whether, what part of it you decide to join as well, and whether you join all of it or not. So that's how this works. And then where does it fit? So just for those of you who've, it's quite a few on the call who've been through IMM Builder, and so you've been through the more detailed course, and so this is the the step after that, as we mentioned earlier. And so you don't have to have completed Builder. Some of you on the course are working your way through it at the moment. It's definitely not a condition, but it will happen that many of those joining the courses going forward are going to be those who've been through Builder or are very keen on this area of impact measurement and management. So it will end up being, as I know for those of you on the call, quite a committed group to this area of work. And the next thing is just about what topics you'd like us to cover. So we've mentioned several times you get to choose the topics we cover. I've got an example here, and Kelly Smith, I hope you don't mind. You'd already suggested some topics, so I borrowed one of them. It's actually not my favorite topic, social return on investment, but it's a very interesting one. So this is just an example, and I borrowed the quote from Kelly here, that who works in the sport for development setting, that actually this would be an area that she'd like to go into a bit more detail on, because actually in the builder course we mentioned social return on investment, but it's one column of a table in a video. It's about a 5 to 10 minute segment of a video. So this would be a topic that we could go into on a webinar this year to then really explain how you can take the steps to take the SROI approach. So that's a really good example. So thanks, Kelly. I didn't ask you, but I thought you'd be okay with me borrowing that one. So what we'd like to do with you all, and this can definitely include my team as well, a couple of you from In Focus here, would just be to get an idea of what topics you would like the beyond today's on art and photography. What would you like the course to cover? So we're going to use a tool which is new from last year at least, which some of you might be familiar with. It's called Mentimeter. And one of my colleagues, Kelly or Cecilia, I'm not sure what you decided in the end, will drop in the link for Mentimeter, and I'll just bring it up at my end. And it's just a simple way to get your feedback into the into our different exercises. So we'll be using this a couple of times. So you just click on that link, and then it will show you where it'll be clear, I think, where to type in. So so this is like what would you like to see within IMM alumni this year? You can enter more than one. Go crazy if you want to. So again, SROI was one example that came through. So others that I think we thought of that seemed to have some interest. There was some interest in doing some more advanced analytical approaches. So looking at how to use SPSS or certain functions of SPSS. I'm trying to think now what else has come up. There's quite a bit on the materiality of outcomes as well. That's come up a couple of times, and using that, using predictive modeling came up too. There's a few. So let's. I'll go quiet for a minute or two, and then bring in your feedback. If you'd like to describe it in a bit more detail, please feel free to click on the raise hand icon, and we'll bring you in to just describe a bit further what you'd like to go through. But in the meantime, I'm going to just go on mute and let you add in, and you can start to see them coming up on the screen here as well. We forgot to ask you, it is the first training, to also put in your name before your entry. So don't worry, obviously, if you've already entered yours in, but if you are just writing in, then if you put your name before the start of the entry, that'd be great. But we'll give it a couple more minutes just to get your feedback. So what I'm going to do is start to go through here, and if you're happy, I'd love to for some of you to speak, if that's okay. If you're happy to come in, if you could just raise your hand, and then I can bring you in just to describe your response here. That'd be great. If not, I never ever like to sort of pressurize people to come in, but I'm going to pick on one or two of my own team. I feel very comfortable with that. But if you're happy to come in and speak, we can't use video on GoToWebinar, unfortunately, which is a shame. But I'll bring in, so Xavier, I'll bring you in first, and then a couple of my team as well. So Xavier, could you kick us off? And I can see yours on the left-hand side here. Would you better talk us through that?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Basically, my question is about how to focus when you are impact-driven company on the correct impact to put forward to bring as added value to the various stakeholders. To make it plain, for the 3 years that USI to exist, we always claimed climate to be a major impact. And here during COVID, making a lot of things with city councils and several towns we are active in, I've quite abruptly discovered that climate was okay, but they are far more interested into the waste impact and the social impact fighting inequalities that our easy rental solution brings forward, far more than climate, which is still a bit too exclusive only for green parts of the city councils on these kind of things. And so we are completely now changing our approach about what we claim first as our main impact, and then what are the secondary impacts. And of course, being a bit ashamed of not having spotted that before, I would be interested into having more highlights or more insight about how to question that, and maybe how to manage that, because my gut feeling is that it will probably evolve around time. And it's not because we are claiming this impact now and we've discovered a better way today to claim impacts which appear to be more relevant to this type of stakeholders, that it will always remain like that in 2022, 23, etc. That's it.
Great. No, thank you, and thanks for coming in first as well. And so with that would partly be about engaging stakeholders in the process, I guess. Is that how you found out that there were other elements that mattered more to them? Was that through consulting with the stakeholders? Is that a part of what you're thinking here?
Yes, but we, that's because we were kind of doing some consultative selling and engaging with them about bringing some relationship, that I finally understood that they were not interested into the impact we were claiming first. They never managed to phrase it explicitly. But once I understood that, and I changed my presentation and the way to introduce some of the meetings with that, everything went so much more smoothly that it was obvious that that was something important to them, that I did not think about asking, and that they would not claim spontaneously, maybe being afraid of being rude to me about my pitch. But obviously there is something to work and to be more inclusive about that.
Nice. Yeah, I could imagine a webinar built around that. There's elements of Builder which cover it a little bit, but don't really get to the heart of it. So yeah, I think that'd be really interesting. Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks again for coming in first. Brilliant. Well, there's some others here. I'll come to some others to talk in a moment as well. But we've also got here, so this was before we remembered to ask you to put your names on them. So apologies again on that. But we've got training colleagues in IMM. And also underneath that, facilitation methods and techniques. And we're trying to angle our Builder course at the moment, the new version. I think a couple of you are on it at the moment, to be more about how do you share your the learning about IMM through Builder. How do you share that with your teams, which is quite interesting. We try to kind of go in that direction, but again, I could imagine a specific webinar on that topic, and then really digging into facilitation methods as well. I could see those two being linked. I know from different people, but I'm definitely getting feedback on IMM reports, so peer expert feedbacks. That would be great. So yeah, I think I guess that's impact reports. So at the end of the process, yeah, how to get feedback and reflections on that. That'd be really interesting. Tim, you mentioned about convincing team members about investing in IMM. That'd be an awesome topic. Yeah, just really into. We talk about it and we mentioned it in Builder last week for 5 minutes or so. But how do you? I guess you could really dig into what are the and practice. What are the arguments to make? I think that could maybe bring in some of the budgeting elements as well. What kind of support you need as well. Yeah, brilliant. And then we've got definitely interest in SROI. So I'm not that might be we've got SROI twice, and mentioned that from Kelly as well. So that's high on the list. We've got also here. So Cecilia, you're on my team, so I feel I can pick on you. So could you describe here your entry here as well?
Okay, yes. Hi, everyone. Well, I would like to think about what happened afterwards. We perform an evaluation and how we can boost strategic process of change with the organizations I work with. And I think that this has to do with some facilitation techniques from the strategic perspective, and at the same time how we can develop some outputs, concrete outputs that could help these organizations to change based on the evaluation evidence.
Nice, thank you. So again, it's something. It's nice with all these responses because they're things that we cover very lightly in the builder course, that we just can't get into the kind of depth that we'd like to. So I think, yeah, it'd be another really great topic. So brilliant, thanks, Cecilia. Pauline, you've mentioned this is a really interesting one, and we don't cover this at all in our courses, so it's of particular interest actually, this one to me. But this is so engaging and managing collaboration with other organisations in. Oh, Pauline, you've got your hand there, hand up there. So could I bring you in to describe this one? It'd be a bit more engaging than me reading it out. So Pauline, could I bring you in there?
Thank you, Tim. I just thought I'd explain it in the context of my organisation. I work with an organisation called My Mind, and we are in the mental health space here in Ireland. And I suppose what we've learned over the last year with COVID in particular is that many of the organisations in our sector, the NGO side rather than the public side, have really risen to the challenges and have really delivered some significant impact. And we know obviously that the impact COVID's having on mental health generally is significant. So it's really about how, and I'm sure all these organizations, everyone's talking about measuring impact, but we're all a little bit territorial at times. And it's really how can we start to engage as a group, a wider group, to measure our kind of overall impact so that we can then use that information to actually move up the food chain in terms of facing off with our government bodies, our public funders, about the case for more investment in this area. So it's really about the message, and I think it ties in with the first couple of ones about how we sort of explain it to our colleagues. This is taking it outside our own organization and trying to get some collaboration and partnership with other organizations. And obviously, besides sharing the workload, it might also help us with the cost side of it, because as small organizations, it can be expensive, as we saw in the earlier course. Some of the activities, require a cash investment to carry them out. And so sharing that burden would be very useful. So really just how to start that discussion with other organizations and break down any barriers we might have with each other about sharing that kind of information.
Brilliant. Yeah, that would be a really interesting topic. So thanks Pauline on that. And it's something actually my next call after this training at 4:30. The training finishes before that, but it's my next call is on that exact topic. It's a proposal we put together for how to support a group of organisations to do exactly what you've written here, Pauline. So they're working in the same field. How do they try and combine resources and share? And get over that territorial, which is very natural. They're kind of competing at the same time because they work in the same area. So it's tricky, but there's some really, really interesting work already done around shared management, and then, sometimes as part of a whole collective impact initiative as well. And we don't cover it at all in Builder. I don't we even mention it. So I think that would be a really, really interesting one to put together. And I keep mentioning webinars, but of course we're putting together e-learning topics on these or modules on whichever topics we decide on. And so you've got that step-by-step guide there as well. And I think that would be a brilliant one to do. So great. Well, thanks, Pauline. And the final ones we've got here as well. So how to come up with your own templates to carry out the IMM process from beginning to end. I'm hoping that's something we're starting to improve on. And even if you're not on the Builder course, what I didn't mention, if you're on IMM Alumni, you've also got continued access to IMM Builder as well. So that's an opportunity to, as we update it, you can still access it. And we are at the moment coming up with new end-to-end templates and processes that we're starting to introduce on the builder course, and a new manual to go with it. So we're going to share those, as we develop new resources, we'll also share them with this alumni group as well. So I'm hoping that we will be able to kind of answer that through our new materials we're developing in the coming weeks as well. But really, really important, and we felt was a slight weakness of Builder at the moment, is that it doesn't have at the moment those really combined. It's got lots of templates, but they're not as combined as we'd like them to be. So I think it's a watch this space on that one, because we will be sharing more in the coming weeks on that. But I definitely agree that's a challenge, and it could definitely be a topic in its own right as well. And Kelly, on my team, you've mentioned interactive. There are two Kellys. There's Kelly C. Interactive and engaging ways of communicating impact. Well, that'd be a fun one to do as well. It'd be a very visual webinar and e-learning module. Brilliant. Well, lots of ideas. So our next step with this, so we're going to now come into our main topic for today, but we wanted to, it's the first webinar of the alumni series. We wanted to explain what it was, how it's going to work. And so we're going to take your feedback here and pull together a list, run it past the others who are on there's 5 or 10 more people who are currently on alumni, just not able to make it today. And so we'll get a first idea of what the topics could be, and we're going to then do some voting with you. We have a voting little link we're going to send out to you to decide on the first topics, and we're going to do like two topics at a time, because it's a rolling series of training, and then just so there's a chance to change and to change minds as more people come in with new ideas. But we will set the first two from list here, and the others who'll be adding in as well. And then my job and my team's job, about I have a team of, including all the consultants, about 10 of us who work on the courses with different feedback. We'll then have to respond to what you come up with to develop, which is what makes it interesting for us too, is that we don't really know what we're going to be developing, but some very interesting topics there. If it's advanced analysis, then yeah, it's not going to be me. I'll just be guiding that process. And so something like SROI, I've got some experience in that area, but I'd also be looking to see if we could bring somebody in who's used it a bit more extensively as well. Brilliant. Okay, well, that's our first part of our webinar. We'll come now into the back into the presentation. And I was just checking all that, but I think it's all very nice introductions that are in the chat. I was just checking if there's anything for me there before we continue. And so today's topic, we couldn't really vote on it, or we just needed to come up with a topic. And this topic has been one that's been requested a few times, so we thought it'd be a good topic to cover. And so we're going to look at using art and photography in impact measurement. And again, this is going to be followed by an e-learning module on the same subject in March. So the reason we had a lot of discussion on this internally, whether to launch an e-learning module and then follow it with the webinar, or do the webinar and then e-learning. We've decided to do it this way around because you can then influence e-learning modules. So a bit later in the webinar, we're going to go through 8 different methods, at a very light touch, just some different ideas about methods you can use using art and photography in impact measurement. But you may well have some others, and we ask for your feedback a bit later on techniques that you've used or might use or have ideas about, and then we can shape the learning a bit more towards your feedback as well. So we thought this way round would be quite good, but whatever we cover today, again, there'll be the learning module to go into, and you'll have ongoing access to that. So again, it's the difference with alumni is the ongoing element of it, that if you then need to work on a method later in the year with art and photography, then you can pick up the learning module and take a look and pick up the guides as well. So it's not really very time bound front. So that's our introduction to the alumni course. Really looking forward, as you can probably tell, to running this over the next year as it grows and we start to get others joining as well. So into our topic for today. So this is all about art and photography in impact measurement. And the first thing to mention about this is that, as we all know, art and photography can be very, very powerful. They've got the potential to shock, to generate emotions, to help us to reflect on our own lives, and you can see a variety of famous photographs there. And the same with the art world as well. And as we'll come to, we're mainly focused on images, which we'll come to why a little bit later. But you know, for an area that we work in, which is very text heavy and numbers heavy, pictures are another way of presenting information and increasing understanding of the results that come out of our impact measurement. And yeah, images have that ability to bridge language, context, and culture when used in a particular way. So it's an exciting part of impact measurement, but can often be quite neglected. And even, as we'll come to, the simplest ways of using photography and art in impact measurement, particularly photography and photos, is you know, often neglected when it can be a very powerful addition to a report. So the next thing to mention, just to go through our learning objectives for this webinar, which would be very similar for the e-learning as well. So we're looking to give you an understanding, if you don't already have this, of the concept of an arts-based approach to IMM, impact measurement and management. So also to consider where art and photography could fit as part of a mixed method approach to data collection and analysis. We're really keen to hear about different experiences from this group, where you have used art and photography in IMM, or if you haven't used it, where could you use it? Very interested in creative ideas as well. We want to get across some of the benefits and challenges of using art and photography in IMM, and also give you some tips and ideas for how you could use art and photography yourselves in your impact measurement and management processes. So that's our aim for the webinar today. Again, it's quite interactive, as these always are, and I don't think it's going to go right up to the smaller group, with the size of this group. Again, 11 of us on the call. It's going to go right up to the 4 o'clock, but I often promise that, and then it does. So we shall see. So then, the next thing to mention is about arts-based evaluation. So, as you know, if you've been through our courses before, we use the term impact measurement and management, and underneath impact measurement, we talk about monitoring, evaluation, and research. So we're calling this arts-based and arts and photography use in IMM, but a more common term here is arts-based evaluation, or ABE. And the distinction is that this is about using arts and within, you know, to measure non-art related concepts, rather than it being about evaluating art, if that makes sense. So I'll give some examples here. So it utilizes art or artistic methods as part of impact measurement management. And so this can include a range of methods, and it can take place across all stages of impact measurement and management, as we'll come to. So this could be photography, it could be drawing or painting, it could be using plasticine, which as we'll come to, we've used on several workshops before. It could be music, it could be poetry, Lego. There's a technique called Lego serious play. I don't know if any of you come across it. I've used Lego before, but not as part of this particular technique, which is really interesting. In preparing for the webinar, I got sidetracked for quite some time reading about Lego serious play, but it's there are actually various techniques that use Lego, of which I'm a huge fan. Then photography is also in the mix as well. And these are not the only arts-based methods that we could talk about here. There are many, but I don't know if we've got drama is quite common as well. One of my most engaging data collection experiences I've had was run by another facilitator, and it was a pretend court case, and where we were debating different issues within this project. It was with we're being trained up in the techniques, but it was very, very powerful actually. I got to be the judge, which is probably why I quite enjoyed it, but it was a really good an engaging use of drama to draw out issues. It's, so drama could be in here too. And as facilitators, we use these kind of arts-based methods as part of our workshops. A different focus, it's not to evaluate, we use them, for example, here, this is from a theory of change workshop, and you can see this little creature that's being created in plasticine as part of the process, and also we use art and drawing a lot. And I think it's important here to mention as well that, you know, often when you're using these kind of techniques, the first thing that jumps into your head is, well, it's engaging for children. Very true, or it can be if it's run in the right way and they're receptive to the approach. But I wouldn't rule out these techniques for adults. This is from working with adults. So across my career where we've used these kind of methods, but again, for theory of change, I've often gone into a workshop thinking, right, this is a culture and a country where they don't normally do this in a workshop. Are they going to enjoy doing drawing or playing with plasticine? And every time it works. I think often when they're not used to doing it as adults, they seem to enjoy it even more. And I would be included in that mix as well. If drawing or plasticine comes out in a workshop, I'm very happy. So we're going to talk quite a bit about children, but these can be methods that can be used with adults as well. But today, to narrow things down, like if we went through the full range of methods against each of these areas, we just felt it was getting too big in scope. Now, if you disagree and you're actually, well, I'd like to know more about some of these other areas, that's no, oh, in fact, sorry, I have realized a mistake. That is meant to be drama in the bottom left. I'm sure some of you may have spotted that. So we did have drama here initially and it's doubled up photography, so apologies. But here at the top left there, you've got photography and drawing and painting. And that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to look at, I guess, the connecting point today is methods that use images in some way, be it drawings, paintings, or photographs. Again, that's just to try and narrow down the scope, but if you disagree and you'd like to know more about these other techniques, that's certainly something we can consider in the within the e-learning as well. But as we'll come to, there are just so many methods we thought it'd be really good to focus things in. Whatever method you are choosing, and we'll come to those a bit later in the webinar, we'd still advise going back to our guidance from IMM Builder about what to consider when selecting data collection methods. So, you know, is the technique appropriate for the data you need? Do you have the expertise to run and to use the methods? So some of these methods require training. It might be, you know, a lot of training, but some training to use them, or training in different facilitation techniques, as one of you requested for IMM alumni to cover in future. And each of these methods will have their own advantages and disadvantages as well. Also very key to consider the respondents, and is it a culturally and linguistic, well, a culturally appropriate method to use? And as we'll come to a little bit later, I don't want to get too far into a bit later in the course, but so whatever method you choose, we would really recommend that you consider what you always would when you're selecting methods and where it fits. And I'd like to now just give you a break from my voice just for a moment, and a very simple exercise for you all. I'd like you to take a look at this painting, and I'd like you just to describe the picture in one word. So if you could use the chat box for this, we're not going to bring up Mentimeter. That would be great. And that's all I'd like you to do. How would you sum up? It could be how it makes you feel, like a summary of the painting itself, but that would be great if you could type that into the chat box, and I'll give a couple of minutes to reflect and let you add that in. and I should have put the title of the painting, which I have just Googled because I've forgotten it. It's Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth. It's from 1948. I'd totally forgotten, actually. So I just thought I'd add that in. I should have put a credit in there as well. So we'll just give it another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll share your responses. Okay, we'll start to read through the chat responses. So we've got longing, distance, away, we've got tired, observation, loneliness, outsider, waiting, and then loneliness. So we have a couple that are similar from the group as well. So brilliant. Well, thanks for engaging with that. And the reason we mention that is just to talk about one of the drawbacks of using, well, it's both a strength and a potential drawback as well, is that, you know, we see images, whether photographs or paintings, and we interpret them in different ways. And that's a strength in some ways, because it can draw out emotions and feelings and ideas that we might not get from a survey or a focus group, or a very focused question. But also, you know, it means it's quite a subjective viewpoint with a lot of techniques that we use using pictures and or using images, because we do see these things and interpret them in different ways. That's often what we want to know and what we want to collect. But that can be a challenge as well if we're all seeing something in different ways to be able to collect and analyze that. And also the other thing to mention here as well is, just to give you some examples down here, is also, you know, it is an area with pictures where you can tell a very compelling story, but how accurate is that story? So some of you may have seen this already. I now forget where the rock is. Again, need to look that up, but it's quite a famous picture. You might have seen this on social media quite a lot. Basically, it's where people are like dangled over the edge of a rock. But if you then look at the actual rock on the left-hand side there, not quite as not quite as impressive. If you fell off it, you get a nasty bump, but it's a little bit of visual trickery there as well. So it's telling a story. You think it's a particular story that it's telling you, and it's actually something quite different. And that again is a risk of using images and using photographs, is that you can be very selective with the story that you're telling. Again, can be a strength, as we'll come to later, but can be a challenge. And another example here, I love this one as well, is that, you know, again, you can present a certain image, but this is then the reality of that image. It's sat in some weeds on the edge of what looks like I guess a road. I thought it was an industrial estate. I'm not entirely sure, but again, a good photographer can really tell their own story. But you know, we're about telling stories in impact measurement and management, of course. But as we describe in the Builder course, we're looking for compelling. You know, the analogy is with a history book, not a fiction. You know, we want to tell a compelling story, but we want that story to be accurate. And so these are all more extreme examples, of course, and they're not intended to be evaluation tools. But the point here is that when we're using photography and art and images, whatever way we use them, we'd always recommend it as part of a mixed method approach. So this would be where we've described before. So, you know, an image, it's a piece of evidence. And we want to combine it with other pieces of evidence that can verify how accurate our images are. So, you know, a mixed method approach, just as a recap from Builder, it's where we are combining methods. We're looking at the same thing using both qualitative and quantitative methods, or methods collecting qualitative and quantitative data. Because there are advantages of both types of data, and we want to combine them. So some of the limitations of using photographs or images more general, photographs and artwork, you know, are the limitations generally of qualitative data. And by combining it with quantitative data, you can get quite a powerful combination together. So we talk a bit, we're going to come into community mapping later, because it's one of my favorite methods, so I'm a bit biased, I'm going to include it, which is a drawing method. I've used it a few times and really love, but I've never used it on its own. It's always with I use it to measure where people feel safe within a community, and I combine it with a question from a survey about the same topic, and it's very powerful for that, the combination of the two. So you could use the methods we go to on their own, and people do. I think I would always think about whether you can combine it with quantitative data, and sort of where does it fit in your overall impact measurement and management. And the next thing to mention, just in our introduction here, is you could use arts-based methods and use images at different levels with different time and effort involved. So we've got a little spectrum here. So on the left is less time and effort, and on the right is more time and effort, and potentially also more expertise as well. So at the far left-hand side, we're going to come to this example from MISA in Kenya a little later. We've just got, using images more effectively in reports. And, there were some really powerful, because MISA were using, well, actually young people as photographers, but generally have some very good photographers and are very good at documenting their work in photos. They could combine together the qualitative and quantitative data and reports. I mean, it feels like an obvious thing to say, but I'm not always doing this very well in my reports. They can be quite dry, as my team will mention, I'm sure. So, that's one simple way that you, oh, and Pauline, I know you have to drop off. So thanks for joining for this part. And yeah, we'll definitely get the recording to you. And so that's one simple way. And then another way, sort of in the middle, is using photos as a stimulus, a stimuli for a focus group or interviews. So it's not a huge amount of time and effort to use, still needs thinking through. So these were images of the community in Matari, where MISA work. I was trying to keep the same theme. So it might be that you're asking people to reflect on their community and how they feel about it using photographs. It can be very, very powerful, but not quite as much work needed, integrating it with an existing, more standard method. And finally there, we've got community mapping that I mentioned, which we're going to come to later, which is a more specific technique. It needs certain facilitation skills. You need to know how to do it. It needs a particular session setting up. So that would be at the other end of the scale as something that would need, more effort. So it's just to say, when we're thinking of using images, we've got a range of different time and effort involved, both from using in reports right through to these really, well-documented specific techniques, which are data collection methods in their own right. So just to bear that in mind as we go through. And so again, it'd be great to bring you in here. And so we're going to bring up Mentimeter, and I've got, well, one and a bit questions for you here to bring in. And the link has come up again. So I'd like you to, it'd be great if you could describe any photography or arts-based methods you've used for impact measurement. It could be anywhere along the spectrum. It could be that you've just got some fantastic photos and you've used them in reports, or it could be that you've used some more advanced techniques, and I know some of my team have that can share that as well. If you've not used any photos or art-based methods before, would love to hear some ideas about how you could use them, that you might have, or something you've wanted to do in a method that you've wanted to use as well. So I'm going to just pause my screen, come out of here, and come to the next slide in Mentimeter. So that should jump up on your screen. So if you could click on that link that Cecilia has entered into the chat box to come back into Mentimeter. So last time we're using it today. And then, yeah, describing any photography arts-based methods, or if you've not used any, are there some that you would like to use in future? And I'll just go quiet again, just as you add in. And if you could enter your name, I'm sorry, I've forgotten to say that again, before you add in, that would be great. And then we can refer back to you as well. And if you'd like to come in and talk about it, love to hear from you. Just raise your hand and we'll bring you in. but let's get them up on the screen first, and then we'll pull some people in to talk if you're happy to. And I should say too, as you're writing in, we understand if you're not writing in because you may not be using any, and this might be why you're on the webinar. So we understand that too. But we'll give a couple more minutes and then go through those that we've got up on the screen. Great, well, we'll start. We've got lots up on the screen. Please do feel free to continue writing in, but we'll just go through some of these responses. And and then if you'd like to come in, just to raise your hands, very happy to bring you in. As always, I'm going to just also pick on my team. So we've got photos and images at the top only, which is very, very common. And again, that's why we were requested to do this training quite a few times, was to start to get some more ideas of how to sort of use more established methods in this area. We've got using pictures and storytelling in presentations and on social media to show the impact we achieve. I would actually love to dig into that in the e-learning a bit further, actually, because in this webinar we don't really go into that, and I think that'd be really, it's an area where it's not. I see it used very well, actually, pictures or in social media, but I think could even be improved or could be used with stats alongside them. So I really like whoever wrote that in. That's a really good, useful point actually for the learning. And oh, Tim, you've got your hand raised there. So could we bring you in into the exercise?
Okay, I was just thinking about a great picture that I have used in a presentation of a person with a mental disability who was meeting the Queen of Belgium. So that was a very good picture to show the impact we achieve. And it's also very popular when we tell people about that. So I think that's a good example.
Well, I guess you know what I'm going to ask Tim next is, do you have it?
Yes, of course.
Can you, if you could find it, we'll switch sharing over to you if that's all right. I'd love to, or if you could drop it into the, are you happy to share? It'd be wonderful to have an actual example.
I will try to share it with a link or something like that.
Yeah, that would be great if you could. But it would be great to have that example. And I think it is an area where, especially when there's a story behind the picture as well. And if you can then connect it into what's happening around it and sort of what the wider meaning is of development as well. And I guess perceptions of disability too. I think it's really, really interesting. So brilliant. Well, thank you, Tim. And if you're able to, if it's going to distract you from the webinar, don't worry. I don't want to pull you out of the webinar to do that, but we'd love to see it if you can.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tim. And Kelly C. I didn't realize you've done what we'd call it community mapping or safe space mapping. Where did you do that? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, so I was part of a workshop that was with some of the sport for development organisations in London, and we wanted to see young people's perceptions of where they felt was safe, and whether that was just within the location of the sport organisation. Maybe it wasn't, maybe they didn't feel safe there, and whether that reached out to the local parks, the local shops, and we really wanted to gauge where they felt was a safe space within their community.
Nice, yeah, it's a kind of also community mapping. It's called different things that I've used. It's a great technique. I love it. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. I didn't realize you'd also worked on that too, Kelly. It's it's really engaging one to use. And Kelly Smith, you mentioned too, you'd like to use something like the community mapping method, but with a gender focus. So looking at spaces, activities where girls and women feel discriminated against. Yeah, I definitely could be used for that. I've seen it used as well for, I think it was a water project. So it was where it was mapping with the group where they could find clean water or where the sort of water sources were. I think that's, I've said, and it was also on a sanitary project looking at toilets as well, where it's very effective. So, I mean, it can be used to map anything, but I could definitely see, spaces and activities where girls and women feel discriminated against would be a really, really strong way to use it. Yeah, let us know if you do that. And again, I'm hoping we will be doing a guide to using it in e-learning, and that might be where we could add some new examples of other ways that it could be used. So then we've got Cecilia, you've mentioned using photography as a stimulus in a focus group with women in Colombia. So using photos from the newspaper to observe their reactions on potential outcomes related to the intervention. Cecilia, could I bring you in just to talk a little bit about that as well? So you were showing them photos from the newspaper and then using that as a stimulus, in effect. Is that's?
Yeah, this was a program of Transparency International, which main objective was to try to help women to report corruption in their own neighborhoods. So what we did was to show them photographies on specific cases of corruption in the newspapers in their own neighborhoods. So we tried to observe how were their reactions and what they did regarding that specific case on their neighborhoods. So this helped us also to see how they tell by their own words what were the main actions they take care for reporting corruption in this focus group.
Interesting, great. Well, we yeah, I was really curious about that, and we're going to come to this a bit later, but I'm going to probably borrow you for the learning, Cecilia, because I do need an example for that one. So if we're able to use it, even if it's just to give an example of the kind of photo used, that'd be amazing. But good to have an example of that early on, so thank you. And we also, on the top right there, so we've got using photography, but always on the positive outcome, hardly on the initial reality we try to solve or fight, like waste or inequalities. And that brings up a really interesting point. We're going to come to some techniques like photo voice, where you're getting, participants go out and they take photos to describe a certain scenario, and that can be risky if that's I guess that, yeah, if I guess to their state of mind, I mean, even physical risk, I mean, it's something to be quite careful with as well. I think that's a really good point, actually, about how to use photography, but we will come to that a little bit later as well. And we've got also here using pictures to show the growth of a network of people with a disability. So again, a really close link of the pictures to the outcomes of the project. I can imagine that enhancing the data that would go alongside that. And Joe, you've mentioned examples of good practice in teaching to share with other teachers. And I've definitely seen this with projects that have done this very well, where they've got, there's a photo I wish I now had in front of me and I don't, which is of it's from a Moving the Goalposts, a project, another project in Kenya, where they've got a photo of a girl playing football with a baby brother or sister attached on her back, and just to show her going about her day. It's an amazing photo. It raises lots of questions, really interesting. But yeah, definitely I've seen it. And we'll come to this with some nicer pictures a bit later as well, in terms of sharing good practice as well. And Cecilia, you've mentioned graphic recording too, and we're going to come to that a little bit later to describe, which I've been really getting into, as you know, in the last couple of days. Great, we'll come back into, Nina had to shoot off, but looking forward to next time. So thanks, Nina. And Tim, we've got the picture in the link. I will just bring that out for the group. Brilliant. So that's the photo. I can't read beneath it, but the photo is awesome. Yeah. So that's the yeah, great. I guess I can also imagine that in a report as well. But it does really sort of build on what we mentioned earlier about using photos that can really generate emotions, can generate discussion as well. It can be very powerful. So brilliant. Oh, fantastic to have an example from the group. And if anybody else has examples they want to share, please do. So we'll come back now into the presentation. We're in very good time. So we've got 2 more parts to run through and just one more exercise. So I want to talk a little bit about the benefits and challenges of using photography and art, and particularly images in impact measurement. So firstly on the benefits, and then we've got a final exercise to do as a group on the challenges. So firstly, the benefits, and do type into the chat box if there are some additional benefits that you can think of that we haven't included here. But firstly, it can be more fun and engaging than more traditional methods of data collection or analysis. If you're playing with plasticine, if you're drawing, it just can be fun, whether you're a child or an adult. It supports participants, it can support participants to express themselves in a different way and generate new insight and hidden meaning that you otherwise might not uncover. And also, it helps participants sometimes to express complex ideas, feelings, and emotions that they might struggle to express in words. And also it can, as we just saw with the example from Tim there, it can really help to express findings in a compelling way that can engage a wider audience than if you're just using text or just using numbers. And then my final two, it provides the safety of a metaphor to express negative and positive reactions. Just to explain, this is an English metaphor, an English language metaphor at least, which I realized over the years does not translate to other languages. We often use the phrase carrot and stick, which now I describe it as quite a brutal metaphor, because it's you give a carrot to a donkey or you beat it with a stick to make it move. But it's become a gentler metaphor over the years of just meaning, they're giving a benefit to motivate, or motivation through, through being strict or as well. So I don't know how that translates across countries. Oh, sorry, I'm going to resume sharing. I think that picked up on the previous. I'm not sure where it paused, but we're back. So thanks for a couple of you mentioned that. So I mentioned, sorry, a carrot and a stick. It's an English metaphor, but the point is that, that it can provide the safety of a metaphor to express negative and positive reactions, although that's something to also be careful about and how that's managed within a workshop. But we've often found this is a case that whether it's expressing negative or positive, or just that metaphors can be a great way of creatively bringing out opinions as well. So the final point there as well is just about the ability of drawings and pictures to address and challenge and rebalance perhaps traditional power dynamics and engage a more diverse audience. So I've seen, I've not myself used it in this context, but where images and pictures and art are used in a context with an audience that might have lower levels of literacy. And it's a way to engage an audience that otherwise might be left out. And then you're left with those who dominate discussion because they're used to dominating the discussion. So those are some of the benefits that I've come across in my experience and from our development of this training. But by all means, if there's other benefits, please drop them into the chat box. But our final exercise for you, and we're just going to use a chat box for this. I've got a scenario here, and I'd like you to think about some challenges or drawbacks with this scenario. So in our example, non-profit organization in Builder, Inclusive Ed, that you all will have come across, they're a pretend organization. So let's say they decide to collect data from their participants who are aged 8 to 12, and they use a drawing exercise instead of using surveys. And participants they're given flip chart paper and colored pens, and they're each asked to draw self-portraits at the start and end of a set of activities. And then they're asked to discuss what they felt each of the pictures represented. So let's imagine it's a 4-week program. At the beginning, they draw a picture of themselves. At the end, they draw a picture of themselves, and they make a comparison and then discuss it. So what I'd like you to do is just to type into the chat box, what do you think might be some of the possible challenges or problems or drawbacks with the approach? So yeah, if you can drop that in, that would be great. Or if you'd like to raise your hand to come in on audio. And as usual, I'll go quiet while you're typing in. But curious, we're going to come up with some of our sort of challenges with this approach and drawbacks, but it'd be great to hear from you as a group first. We're just going to give it till 15 minutes past, so till 3:15 UK time, 4:15 if you're in Europe, and then we'll share the responses. Great, well, let's share some of the responses and we'll then go through ours as well. But if you're still typing in, please continue. So we've got, firstly, the goal, Tim's mentioned the goal is not clear, and a child could draw two totally different portraits, not influenced by the situation. Which I definitely agree that maybe that we've only been able to give a very light description here, and I think they'd have to be very tight on their descriptions of what the exercise is. Xavier, you mentioned that some participants might feel uncomfortable because their drawing capabilities and face difficulties convey emotions through drawings. So making it simpler to everybody. So drawing stick figures would prevent this shame of having the drawing judged by others. Definitely one of our biggest challenges I wanted to raise, and we picked this up at the end. And I love that idea. The simpler and the more fun you can make it, the better. I'm from a family of well, half my family are artists or very talented at drawing, and every Christmas, if we play a drawing game, we're very big on games. And it is just, even for me, I'm drawing stick people, and then you get these amazing portraits, and even with family, that's quite intimidating, even though I'm comfortable, it's so I think you can, even as an adult, get that. And I think, as you say, the simpler you can make it, the more fun. I love that. I think the better, but that's definitely a drawback that we've come across. Cecilia, you've mentioned it could be challenging to identify some of the differences and similarities in the drawings among children, just because of the way that they draw. So I think the analysis could be challenging, and reading into the analysis. Kelly, you've mentioned children may feel that they, on the outside, they haven't changed from the program and may draw a similar portrait to the start. And the facilitator would have to give really detailed guidance on what they want the self-portraits to reflect. So I would agree. And I think if they were just doing it in this way without that kind of detailed guidance, it would be, I completely agree, it would be probably irresponsible as well. But we were trying to pick an example where it, there were maybe some more obvious flaws with it. But I would totally agree with that and those comments so far. So I would add our own ones in here too, and very similar to yours, many of these. So I think, firstly, they've used this instead of surveys, so that's fine, but ideally maybe, it could be combined with some quantitative data as well. I think, secondly, some of the participants, well, this is the point that Xavier raised, is that they're not necessarily comfortable with drawing and might find the session a bit intimidating. And I like that idea of simplifying it and keeping it as fun and as light as possible. But it's got to be appreciated that not everybody enjoys drawing. And what we don't want on an ethical point of view is from an ethical side of things, is that people feel intimidated by it. And then there's an element here of their sharing their thoughts and feelings as part of a group as well that we mentioned here, which, again, they may not feel comfortable with. I think there'd be a lot of work needed to make sure people are comfortable and that the participants are comfortable on that side of things as well. So I think that the reason that, you could sum up some of these, that the facilitation becomes really important to do this in a way that collects quality data and collects it ethically, and really thinking through how the facilitation would work. And that's why some more established techniques are really useful to use, because they've already laid out those steps. But if I was running a session, be constantly checking and taking these steps to make sure it is suitable and for the participants. So quite a few ideas there about some of the drawbacks. They're quite common drawbacks with approaches that collect more qualitative data. Actually, it's not necessarily unique to using art and photography. Brilliant. So we'll come to our final section. So we'll be about another 10 or 15 minutes. So this webinar was much more 90 minutes than 2 hours, but happy to stick around if any questions from the group. But what we'd like to do now is just to share some different examples of, and really at this stage, we're not going to get into how to use these methods step by step. It's not really the role of a webinar to do that, but this is what we're going to be doing with e-learning. And already when I was creating this, I had some good ideas about who we could bring in, to give examples of where they've used these different techniques as well. So what we might do for the e-learning is maybe do some interviews with practitioners who are more experienced than me in using some of these methods. So today is just to give you some, whether you're here live, you're watching us back, is just to give you some ideas and some hints of what you could use. When we come to the end, I'd love to hear of other techniques you'd like to maybe know more about, because we've only covered 8 and there are many, and we've really tried to cover the sort of full spectrum of, using images in reports right up to using specific techniques. So for using photos in reports, again, I don't always think this is that well done. I think there's a lot more that could be done in this area, and I include myself in that as well. We really like this example from MISA we looked at earlier, because if we zoom in here, I think it's a really effective use of a photo. It's actually a bigger photo than this and a bigger crowd, but it's you've got the description on the right hand side, and you've got a page of charts and graphs on the previous page, and then you've got this fantastic photo showing how their outreach works in a community and the kind of engagement they get. It's very compelling, it's very colorful, grabs your attention, but it's not isolated from the narrative and the figures around it as well. So it's a really powerful use of an image in a report, and this is what we're going to build on the e-learning, is to give some guidelines in this area. And then another example here of their work readiness program as well, that how they've built in images alongside the stats and statistics that they've used here as well. So an obvious place to start, but it's often an underused area of using photos in a report. And then alongside this is what we mentioned a bit earlier, and Cecilia gave an example of, and that's a use of stimuli in interviews and focus groups. So using an image to, and it's often also called photo interviewing, so where photos are used as a prompt during an interview, but it's there to, to stimulate discussion and get engagement. I find it can break up a focus group really nicely as well. So, people that might have switched off a bit from your focus group questions might come alive a bit if you're then using a photo or an image to generate discussions and ask people how they feel. I think it's something to also be a little bit careful about as well, because like with a question in a focus group, it's what will it trigger a negative emotion? There needs to be some thought if it's a more possibly a photo that triggers something a little more negative in somebody as well. We need a bit more thought, but can be very useful. And then we then got the use of drawings and images within questionnaires. So again, it can be a good stimulus, particularly younger children. And we love the example here. I think we're going to come up with our own example of this. But I really thought this was quite powerful. But just as an idea of how to integrate images into a data collection tool, particularly with children, to make it a bit more engaging for them, as compared to a written survey, which if you hand out to a younger child, it can be quite problematic. So I thought this was a really, really nice example. Maybe it's a little cluttered potentially. You could critique it, but I like the idea and the style of it. So I thought that's quite a good idea, something I'd like to do a bit more of. Photo voice is a technique that, again, I've seen used in Kenya. I've not really used it much myself, but it's where the participants themselves have been given either using their phones or given a camera, like a disposable camera potentially. So that might be a little while ago. They were using disposable cameras when I saw this used, but they, as in the example here, this is from a youth project in London that one of my colleagues worked on, and they explored identity and diversity in community through participants taking portrait photographs. And these were inspired by the subject's one-word description of themselves, and then they reflected that. You can see that here within the portraits. So that's one way to use it. I've seen it used in one project where they were taking photos of to document community cleanups where they'd been cleaning up pollution within a community, and that worked very well. And so being involved in the process itself with photo voice can be quite positive. So the participants found that, so in one study of the impact of photo voice, they found that participants who took part increased critical awareness and self-perception and knowledge. So this is an advantage I missed out earlier that can come from doing these exercises, that they can also have a positive impact in themselves on the participants, aside from being an evaluation technique. On our next two, so community mapping, this is where I've described in Builder before, you ask your participants to effectively draw a map of their community and then to circle, for example, where they feel safe or not. Kelly mentioned earlier, I think a really good use of it would be, could be in a gender project to, again, I mean, I guess it could look at safety, it could look at different aspects of gender through drawing on a map. It could be, I mentioned toilets earlier, where or a sanitation project where they wash their hands. The example I've used, and most of you have already heard this already on Builder, is in Colombia, where a project I worked with there, they ran this process and the children drew a football pitch, and they were drawing red circles where they felt unsafe and green where they felt safe. And they were drawing where they're actually drawing bodies on the pitch, and they were drawing, that was the dividing line between two gangs, which is quite a powerful example. But that's the most extreme example I've seen on it. In this example, in the photo here in Kenya, they were not. It was a different exercise. And we combined it with a survey. But there are a number of different ways to use this, and I'm keen to reflect that in the guide and e-learning as well. But it's a great technique to use. Collages are great, can be really powerful. So this is basically getting a series of images to reflect how people feel or their ideas or experience. So it's a form of self-reporting. So this is how I feel about myself after the project, and they give, they might put an eagle soaring, or it's a way again of using metaphors to reflect their feelings. And it could be both a cutout and gluing, it can be a hands-on exercise. I've only ever used it in an online setting, where they were taking images, they were Googling images and then putting together. That was with adults, so it's quite a safe way of doing it. But, really can be a very powerful technique, especially alongside quantitative data and data collection. We've got graphic recording, which is about creating visual representations of concepts and stories and discussions. So this is quite new to me. I've been reading up about it in the last few days. And then, so it's, imagine if you go into a workshop and you've got, as you discuss, you have somebody there who's taking a visual record of what you discussed. And in preparing for this workshop and reading about it, I realized that I've come across that technique in one of our clients that I'm going to ask. They did a fantastic version of this. I'm going to ask to borrow. Really interesting technique. I think, Cecilia, you mentioned earlier you've had some experience of it. But the person who was doing this was a really good artist. So these are fantastic images, this one-page summary of the meeting that had occurred. So it's really interesting. We're really looking forward to writing up a bit more about that. And then finally, we've got, there's some more general use of drawings and metaphors within a workshop setting. So one of my colleagues, this is one of their pictures here from a workshop, which is actually training data collectors in, now I can't remember if it's Lebanon or Jordan, and I got this wrong on the last webinar as well, but it was working with, I think, around 15-year-olds in a refugee camp, and they're being trained to collect data. And there's a lot of use of drawings as part of that. And we've just generally included this here, as a way of bringing out responses to particular questions. So an example we've got here from a project was, asking project staff to draw pictures representing organizational change that they were hoping for. And actually the management in this case found that quite surprising. It was drawing out things that they wouldn't have otherwise expected to find. So that's the 8 that we've come up with. and we're going to be going into step by step how to apply these in e-learning. But I'd love to hear if you've got other ideas of what you would like us to include, or other techniques you've come across that you'd like to use. Let us know as we develop the e-learning. It'd be really interesting to include. And then the final thing is just to go through a final few tips about using art and photography and using images in impact measurement and management. So firstly, we picked up on this earlier, but just ensuring that the group you work with is comfortable with the methods you choose, and thinking through, as Xavier mentioned earlier, ways you can make them more comfortable within a workshop setting is really important. Thinking about where your method fits in the context of your overall data collection is really important. Where does it fit alongside, the collection of more quantitative data and more traditional methods like surveys and focus groups? You could also consider whether to work with an artist or a designer or an evaluator or researcher that has a lot of experience in this area. So I mentioned also with graphic recording a little bit earlier that the version I'd seen of that was an artist that was supporting, who's quite a talented cartoonist. So obviously it's got budget implications potentially, but worth considering if that's something that you could bring in. And then also thinking ahead to how you're going to analyze the data you collect and the time and the skills that you need for that, because you could end up with a whole set of pictures. What do you do with them then? How do you draw out findings from them? It's worth considering that, and that could definitely be something we look at a bit further in the e-learning course, and just reflect on some of the qualitative analysis steps that would apply, and pulling out themes as well. So that's really us for today, and our introduction to using art and photography and using still images within impact measurement and management. And so our next steps beyond today, we're going to send out this recording, and we're also going to send to you and to the wider group, again, it's about 15 or 20 people, the topics that you've come up with earlier today that we could cover. And we're then going to be including those topics in a list and getting a vote on them. And then once we have our topic for the next webinar, which would be in April, we'll send out a doodle poll this time, so we can get a time that as many of you can make as possible, including those new people who are joining for that session as well. So it's been great to run this actually with a smaller group of mainly people I know. Has been really nice for me actually. So appreciate your time and input into the webinar. I'll be sticking around. If there are any questions, do let me know. Otherwise, we'll be following up on email. And just to say to have a great remainder of your week, wherever you are in the world, and whatever your situation with COVID and lockdowns. I hope it's a good remainder of the week. And thanks everybody again for your time and input.